Hey, sunshine, how are you? Happy Friday. So I've made some changes, as you can see, some visual changes. We'll see if it helps with the problem. I am doing all right, and as long as the TikTok gods can stay out of my way tonight, we'll be all right. How about yourself? Yeah, everybody can see all the detail in my beard now. My face is just so freaking huge. You know, the thing is I don't have this problem over on the tubes. It's weird. Hey, Jasmine, how are you? Welcome in. Yeah, you guys get to get right in my face tonight. It is a spooky story, but I don't know. I wouldn't call it scary. Sound booth happiness. Yes, this is correct. I finally put it all together, and yeah. Oh, their entire content monitoring system is AI based. So, but hey, Phil, welcome in. So we'll see how we do tonight. We'll see if TikTok manages to slap me with any restrictions tonight. Totally fine. Come back on Sunday night. We'll be reading Peter Pan. Hey, Lorna, how are you? It is not necessarily Victorian spooky, but it is definitely it has lineage that ties back. Great, I look forward to seeing you. Take care of yourself, Mickey. I am glad you joined as well, Ra. You are very welcome. I'm doing all right. Well, as I was saying a little while ago, as long as the TikTok gods stay out of my way tonight, we'll be all right. I got into a bit of a back and forth with an actual human from their support team last couple nights ago, and I was up late trying to figure out what it is that I was doing that was so wrong, and I think I figured it out. So I think that the restrictions are coming from, so you guys all know, or those of you that have been here for a while know, that occasionally I would get that little pop-up that comes up and you got to do a little puzzle piece thing because they're trying to make sure you're actually still there. And I think that because my camera image was only taking up about half the screen. Hey, Jules, welcome in. And because I'm sitting here reading and I'm staring at a screen, I'm not moving a whole lot. And because my mustache kind of hangs down over my mouth, you really can't see my mouth move much either. So I think what was happening is it was actually thinking, because between that and the cover image, it was thinking that I was not a real person, or at least not there. Sunflower, so it's scary depending on the story that I'm reading. The Wednesdays and Fridays are generally sort of dark, weird tales, anything from science fiction to horror to just straight up strange. And then Sunday and Monday are generally family-friendly nights, like this week. On Sunday, we're going to be reading Peter Pan, and that's probably going to take us actually 2 weeks. So 2 Sundays and 2 Mondays. Yeah, don't start with the dancing. Yeah, don't have to dance. I just move my head around a little bit more or something. I don't know. I'm actually probably going to trim my beard back a bit, just because it's getting a little out of control, and so that way TikTok can see my luscious lips a little bit. Yes, I know, Wings. You heard dance. It is a story that asks some questions about the nature of the unknown and if there are still unknown things left to be discovered. 72 in Walworth. Yeah, it's about that here in Greece. Getting a lot of rain, man. I can't keep up with the damn lawn. So, see the face. Well, this is the face in all its 51-year-old glory. Oh, absolutely. That's one of the things that I strive for. That is, for me, having people come in and say that this is a safe space, especially on nights where I'm reading some really gory stuff or some really scary stuff, for people to still come in here and be able to feel safe, that's a win in my book. So I really appreciate you acknowledging that, and I appreciate the follow very, very much. Tashana, welcome from Florida. Yeah, it's been very rainy so far this season up here, up in the Northeast. So, but I'm okay with it. You know, if it's not hitting 90 degrees, it's, you know, no, I do not teach at Hogwarts. But I have gotten the, hey, you look like Hagrid. It's always like Hagrid or the fat guy from Lost. I get that a lot too. And Kevin Smith, before Kevin Smith went and lost all of his weight. Freaking traitor. He's a great guy though. I have had the opportunity to meet Kevin, and he's a spectacular human being, really generous. So, oh, Sunflower, thank you. I strive to welcome people in with everything I have going on here. So, I'm going to be starting to read here in a couple of minutes. So, just give a chance for people to start filtering in. If you guys want to smash that like button and share and repost, that helps put me in front of more people's eye holes or ear holes. So, yeah. I appreciate that, Jasmine. I do. I'll be revealing what I'm reading here in just a minute. It'll be fun, especially if you are a lover of weird tales and anywhere from Victorian era to early 20th century horror. This story kind of touches on all of it. The author's name is Fritz Leiber, and he is one of the giants of the weird tales and pulp science fiction and horror movement of the early 20th century. All right. Well, I appreciate all the likes and the follows and the gifts and everything. I really appreciate you guys very much. And I finished downing my fuel. If you are a consumer of Monster energy drinks, you may like and have not tried their Punk Punch flavor. It's actually really good. No, I'm glad you like the music, Jules. Really do. I am a unabashed fan of Ghost Energy. Their Welch's Grape and their Welch's Grape Cran flavor are awesome. So, getting ready for bed. Yep, trust me, if you fall asleep, I won't blame you. Hello from Salem, Oregon. Wiener Dog Dad. Welcome in. Welcome back, I should say. I try to remember everybody that comes and goes comes in and then comes back another time, because I really appreciate To me, I would rather have, like, so I have now hit 20,000 followers. Okay. And so I've gained about 18,000 followers in the last year. And, oh, Deanna, welcome in. I'm glad you're here. Hello, Linden, Wisconsin. You're, not tonight, you're crocheting and listening. Okay, cool. Oh, Eric, thank you. Hey, Linda, how are you? Pizza Monster, we are reading a lovely, dark and weird tale by the illustrious Fritz Leiber. Oh, good, Shauna. I'm so glad. I like I said, I try to remember everybody that comes and goes, and because I really appreciate you. I love the fact that I have a following that is made up of people that didn't show up because of a viral video, or you guys came across my live and you said, you know what? I want this. I want more of this. So you follow and you come back. And that, I mean, there are creators with 10 times my following that would kill to have people like you. So I really appreciate it. Yes, I shall. I don't have a podcast yet, but if you go over on the tubes and look up my username, UndeadPapa, you will find reposts of all my shows. Just saying. Can't say the site out loud because God forbid I get in trouble. But we love TikTok and we love the TikTok shop. This stream is what? Why am I getting a warning over on the tubes? Is YouTube messing with me now? Stream's current bitrate is lower than the recommended bitrate. Don't care. Just stream it. Just stream it, yo. All right. Hey, Eddie, I saw you sneak in here, sir. Welcome in. All right, so let's get started. We got 115 people in here. We might as well get going. But to the podcast thing, hello, Barbrights. How are you? I have been thinking about doing one. Haven't decided with what, but I have a couple of people that I'm talking to do a partnership on one. So, all right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Storytime with UndeadPapa. Now, before we begin tonight, I want to point out a fun little connection. If you joined us on Wednesday, you may remember our first story, which was Ken and Albrecht's Scrapbook by M.R. James. One of the chapter quotations in tonight's story is actually taken from that very tale. I always enjoy discovering little connections like that. These authors were reading each other's work, building on one another's ideas, and helping shape the world of weird fiction, one story at a time. Sarah, yes, I do occasionally. It depends on the book that I'm working on, the audiobook that I'm working on. The one I'm currently working on, I can't. One, I haven't asked the author, but two, I'm not going to because the book is a little bit on the smutty side. So, yeah. So I would definitely get spanked on live if I not actually get your minds out of the gutter. I would get in trouble with the TikTok gods if I actually tried to record that one live. So, but when I do recording sessions, generally they're kind of just drop in. I kind of just decide I'm going to go live that day. I don't really announce it. But if I do have a planned one, you guys will be the first to know. All right. So tonight we ask a simple question. Has the modern world explained away all of its mysteries? Or are there still places where the unknown waits patiently, just beyond the edge of our understanding? Some roads are best left untraveled, and some questions are better left unanswered. All it takes is one small glimpse into the dark to change everything. Hey, Gary, welcome in. So, wherever you're listening from, dim the lights, sit back, and relax, because story time is about to begin. This is A Bit of the Dark World by Fritz Leiber. Now, for anybody wondering, you will see a little bit of a change tonight if you haven't already noticed. My face is much bigger on the screen, and the image for the story is not large and no as just text. Part of the reason is I am trying to keep from getting smacked with a restriction for being unoriginal or having reproduced content. So doing a lot of research from Wednesday when I got restricted hard because of that. I've decided to make a couple of changes and see what happens. So I did click all by myself. Aren't you proud of me? I'm such a good noodle. All right, this is A Bit of the Dark World by Fritz Leiber. This was originally published in Fantastic Stories of Imagination in February of 1962. There was a crack in his head, and a little of the dark world came through and pressed him to death. Rudyard Kipling, The Phantom Rickshaw. The antique-seeming dip-nosed black Volks touring car with its driver and 2 other passengers besides myself was buzzing up a saddle ridge of the Santa Monica Mountains, swinging close past that squat, brush-choked peaks with their strange, up-jutting, worn, rocky pinnacles and looked like primeval monoliths or robed and hooded stone monsters. We were moving with the top down and slow enough to glimpse sharply the occasional little pale lizard skitter or grasshopper whirl up out of our way over the gray crushed stone. It was a brilliantly clear day with the compact clouds that emphasized the dizzying inverted depth of the blue sky. Between clouds, the sun was dazzlingly bright. More than once, as we headed straight toward the low-trending, distant, incandescent orb along a switchback stretch, I was stung. Holy cow, I cannot breathe. I cannot read tonight. I gotta clean my glasses. Either clean my glasses or put my head back on straight. Holy cow. That's what I get for reading in my booth for the first time. You guys are wondering why there's a black background. It's because I actually set up my recording booth the other night. So, yeah. All right, let's get back to it. I was stung by its beams and suffered the penalty of black patches swimming in my vision for a minute. We had met only 2 cars and glimpsed only a half a dozen houses and cabins since leaving the Pacific Coast Highway. A remarkable loneliness, considering that Los Angeles was a scant hour's drive behind us. It was a loneliness that had drawn Vicky and myself apart with its silent intimations of mysteries and revelations, but not yet driven us together again, though there was a hint that it would, by reason of its menace. Franz Kinsman, sitting in front to the left, and his neighbor who had volunteered to do this stretch of the driving, Mr. Morton or Morgan or Mortensen, I wasn't sure, seemed less affected by the landscape, as one would expect, seeing they were both rather familiar with it than Vicky or I. Though it was hard to gauge reactions merely from the attitude of the back of Franz's close-cropped gray head or Mr. M's faded brown duck hat pulled low to shade his eyes. We had just passed that point of the little Sycamore Canyon Road where all the Santa Barbara Islands are visible like an argosy of blue-gray, faintly granular clouds floating on the surface of the pale blue Pacific, when I suddenly remarked, for no profound major reason that I was aware of at that time, I don't suppose it's any longer possible today to write a truly gripping story of supernatural horror, or for that matter, to undergo a deeply disturbing experience of supernatural terror. Oh, there were enough minor reasons for the topic of my remark. Vicky and I had worked in a couple of cheap monster movies. Franz Kinsman was a distinguished science fantasy writer as well as a research psychologist. And the 3 of us had often gabbed about the weird in life and art. Also, there had been the faintest hint of mystery in Franz's invitation to Vicky and myself to spend with him the weekend of his return to Rim House after a month in L.A. Finally, the abrupt transition from a teeming city to a forbidding expanse of nature always has an eerie sting, as Franz immediately brought up without turning his head. "I'll tell you the first condition for such an experience or artistic inspiration," he said as the Volks entered a cool band of shadow. "You've got to get away from the hive." "The hive?" Vicky questioned, understanding very well what he meant, I was sure, but wanting to hear him talk and have him turn his head. Franz obliged. He was a singularly handsome, thoughtful, noble face, hardly of our times, though looking all of his 50 years and with eyes dark-circled ever since the death of his wife and 2 sons in a jet crash a year ago. "I mean the city," he said as we buzzed into the sun again. The human stamping ground where we've policemen to guard us and psychiatrists to monitor our minds and neighbors to jabber at us, and where our ears are so full of the clack of the mass media that it's practically impossible to think or sense or feel deeply anything that's beyond humanity. Today, the city, in its figurative sense, covers the whole world and the seas and the airways too, and by anticipation, the spaceways. I think what you mean, Glenn, is that it's hard to get out of the city even in the wilderness." Mr. M. honked twice at a blind hairpin turn and put in the next remark. "I don't know about that," he said, hunching determinedly over the wheel, "but I should think you could find all the horror and terror you wanted, Mr. Seabury, without going away from home, though it'd make pretty grim films. I mean, the brainwashing, murders, race riots, stuff like that, not to mention the atom bomb." "Right," I countered, "but I'm talking about supernatural horror, which is almost the antithesis of even the worst human violence and cruelty. Hauntings, the suspension of scientific law, the intrusion of the unutterly alien, the sense of something listening at the rim of the cosmos or scratching faintly at the other side of the sky." As I said that, Franz looked around at me sharply with what seemed an expression of sudden excitement and apprehension. But at that moment the sun blinded me again, and Vicky said, "Doesn't science fiction give you that, Glenn? I mean, horrors from other planets, the extraterrestrial monster." "No," I told her, blinking at the fuzzy black globe that crawled across the mountains, "because the monster from Mars or wherever has, at least as visualized by the author, so many extra feet, so many tentacles, so many purple eyes as the cop on the beat, or if he has a gas, he's a describable gas, the exact sort of goon men will be meeting when the spaceships start traveling the starways. I'm thinking of something, well, ghostly, utterly weird." And it's that thing, Glenn, that ghostly, utterly weird thing that you believe can't be written about effectively anymore, or experienced? Franz asked me with an odd note of suppressed eagerness, eyeing me keenly, although the Volks was traveling a jaunty section. "Why?" "You started to sketch the reasons yourself a moment ago," I said. My newest black globe was slipping sideways now, pulsing, starting to fade. "We've become too smart and shrewd and sophisticated to be scared by fantasies. Most especially, we've got an army of experts to explain away the supernatural sort of thing the instant it starts to happen. The physicist boys have put matter and energy through the finest sieves. There's no room left in it for mysterious rays and influences except for the ones they've described and catalogued. The astronomers are keeping tabs on the rim of the cosmos with their giant telescopes. The Earth's been pretty thoroughly explored, enough to show there aren't any lost worlds in darkest Africa or mountains of madness near the South Pole. What about religion? Vicky suggested. Most religions, I replied, steer away from the supernatural today, at least the religions that would attract an intellectual person. They concentrate on brotherhood, social service, moral leadership, or dictatorship, and fine-drawn reconciliations of theology of the facts of science. They're not really interested in miracles or devils. Well, the occult, then, Vicky persisted. Psionics. Nothing much there either, I asserted. If you do decide to go in for telepathy, ESP hauntings, the supernatural sort of thing, you find that territory has all been staked out by Dr. Rhine rifling his eternal Zener cards, and a bunch of other parapsychologists who tell you they've got the whole benign spirit world firmly in hand, and who are as busy classifying and file carding as the physicists. But worst of all, I went on as Mr. M slowed the Volks for a potholed uphill stretch, we've got 77 breeds of certified psychiatrists and psychologists, Franz, all set to explain the least eerie feeling or sense of wonder we get in terms of the working of our unconscious minds, our everyday human relationships, and our past emotional experiences. Vicky chuckled throatily and put in, Supernatural dread almost always turns out to be nothing but childhood misconceptions of fears about sex. Mom's the witch with her breasts of mystery and her underground baby factory, while the dark, hot, bristly demon dissolves to dear old Dad. At that moment, the Volks, avoiding another dark spill of gravel, again aimed straight at the sun. I dodged it in part, but Vicky got it full in the eyes, as I could tell from the odd way she was blinking sideways at the turreted hills a moment later. Exactly, I told her. The point is, Franz, that these experts are experts. All joking aside, and they've divvied up the outer and inner world between them. And if we just start to notice something strange, we turn to them at once, either actually or in our imaginations. And they have rational, down-to-earth explanations already. And because each of the experts knows a lot more about his special field than we do, we have to accept their explanations, or else go off our own merry way, knowing in our heart of hearts that we're behaving like stubborn romantic adolescents or out-and-out crackpots. The result is, I finished, as the Volks got past the potholes, that there's no room left in the world for the weird, though plenty for crude, contemptuous, wisecracking, fun-poking imitations of it, as shown by the floods of corny monster films and the stacks of Monster and Madness magazines with their fractionally educated, hip-cackling, and beatnik jeers. Laughing in the dark, Franz said lightly, looking past us back the road, where the thin dust the Volks raised was falling over the cliff toward the thorny, dark ravines below. Meaning? Vicky asked. People still are afraid, he stated simply. And of the same things, they've just got more defenses against their fears. They've learned to talk louder and faster and smarter and funnier and with more parroted expert-given authority to shut them out. Why, I could tell you, he checked himself. He really did seem intensely excited beneath the calm philosopher's mask. I can make it clear, he said, by an analogy. Do, Vicky urged. Half turned in his seat, Franz looked straight back at the two of us. A quarter of a mile ahead or so, the road, climbing a little again, plunged into a stretch of heavy cloud shadow. I noted this fact with relief, as I now had no less than 3 dark, fuzzy globes crawling around the horizon, and I yearned to be out of the sun. From the way Vicky was squinting, I could tell she was in the same fix. Mr. M, with his pulled-down hat, and Franz faced around, seemed less affected. Franz said, Imagine that mankind is just one man, and his family living in a house in a clearing in the midst of a dark, dangerous forest, largely unknown, largely unexplored. While he works and while he rests, while he makes love to his wife or plays with his children, he's always keeping an eye on that forest. And after a while, he becomes prosperous enough to hire guards to watch the forest for him. Men trained in scouting and woodcraft, your experts, Glenn. The man comes to depend on them for his safety. He defers to their judgment. He is perfectly willing to admit that each of them knows a little more about one small nearby sector of the forest than he does. But what if those guards should all come to him one day and say, "Look, Master, there really is no forest out there at all, only some farmlands we're cultivating that stretch to the ends of the universe. In fact, there never was a forest out there at all. Master, you imagined all those black trees and choked aisles because you were scared of the witch doctor." Would the man believe them? Would he have the faintest justification for believing them? Or would he simply decide that his hired guards, vain of their little skills and scoutings, had developed delusions of omniscience? The cloud shadow was very close now, just at the top of the slight climb we'd almost finished. Fran's kinsman leaned closer to us against the back of the front seat, and there was a hush in his voice as he said, "The dark, dangerous forest is still there, my friends. Beyond the space of the astronauts and the astronomers, beyond the dark, tangled regions of Freudian and Jungian psychiatry, beyond the dubious psi realms of Dr. Rhine, beyond the areas policed by the little commissars and priests and motivations research man, far, far beyond the mad beat, half-hysterical laughter. The utterly unknown still is, and the eerie and ghostly lurk, as much wrapped in mystery as ever." With an exhilarating chilling and glooming, the Volks rolled into the sharply edged cloud shadow. Switching around in his seat, Franz began eagerly, intently, rapidly to search the landscape ahead. What seemed suddenly to expand, gain depth, and spring into sharper existence with the screening off of the blinding sun. Almost at once his gaze fixed on a smoothly ridged gray stone pinnacle that had just come into view on the opposite rim of the canyon valley beside us. He slapped Mr. M on the shoulder and pointed with his other hand at a small parking area, surfaced like the road, on the hillside bulge where we were crossing. Then, as Mr. M swung the car to a grating stop on the indicated area just on the brink of the drop, Franz raised in his seat and, looking over the windshield, pointed commandingly at the gray pinnacle while lifting his other hand a little, fingers tautly spread, in a gesture enjoining silence. I looked at the pinnacle. At first I saw nothing but the half-dozen round, merging turrets of gray rock springing out of the brush-covered hilltop. Then it seemed to me that the last of my annoying after-images of the sun, dark, pulsing, fringe-edged, had found lodgment there. I blinked and swung my eyes a little to make it go away, or at least move off. For after all, it was nothing but a fading disturbance in my retinas that purely by chance momentarily coincided with the pinnacle. It would not move away. It clung to the pinnacle, a dark, translucent, pulsing shape, as if held there by some incredible magnetic attraction. I shivered. I felt all my muscles faintly chill and tighten at this unnatural linkage between the space inside my head and the space outside it. At this weird tie between the sort of figures that one sees in the real world and the kind that swim before the eyes when one closes them in the dark. I blinked my eyes harder, swung my head from side to side. It was no use. The shaggy, dark shape with the strange lines going out from it clung to the pinnacle like some giant clawed, crouching beast. And instead of fading, it now began to darken further, even to blacken. The faint lines got a black glitter. The whole thing began horridly to make a definite appearance and expression, much as the figures we see swimming in the dark become faces or masks or muzzles or forms in response to our veering imagination. Though now I felt no ability whatever to change the trend of the shaping of the thing on the pinnacle. Vicky's fingers dug into my arm with painful force. Without realizing, we both stood up in the back of the car and were leaning forward, close to Franz. My own hands gripped the back of the front seat. Only Mr. M hadn't raised up, though he was staring at the pinnacle too. Vicky began in a slow, rasping, strained voice. "Why, it looks like..." With a sharp jerk of his spread-fingered hand, Franz commanded her to be silent. Then, without taking his eyes away from the crag, he dipped in the side pocket of his coat and was next reaching some things back toward us. I saw, without looking at them directly, that they were blank white cards and stub pencils. Vicky and I took them. So did Mr. M. Franz whispered hoarsely, "Don't say what you see. Write it down, just your impressions now, quickly. The thing won't last long, I think." For the next few seconds, the four of us looked and scribbled and shivered. At least I know I was shuddering at one point, though not for an instant taking my eyes away. Then, for me, the pinnacle was suddenly bare. I knew that it must have become so for the others too, almost the same instant, from the way their shoulders slumped and the strained sigh Vicky gave. We didn't say a word, just breathed hard for a moment or so, then passed the cards around and read them. Most of the writing or printing had the big sloppiness of something scribbled without looking at the paper. But beyond that, there was a visible tremor or shakiness, especially in Vicky's notes and my own. Vicky Quinn's, black tiger burning bright, blinding fur or vines, stickiness. Franz Kinsman's, black empress glittering cloak of threads, visual glue. Mine, Glenn Seabury's, giant spider, black lighthouse, the web, the pull on the eyes. Mr. M, whose writing was firmest. I don't see anything, except 3 people looking at a big, bare, gray rock as if it were the door to hell. Hey, Peggy, welcome in. And it was Mr. M who first looked up. We met his gaze. His lips sketched a tentative grin that seemed both sour and uneasy. He said after a bit, "Well, you certainly had your young friends pretty well hypnotized, Mr. Kinsman." Franz asked calmly, "Is that your explanation, Ed? Hypnotic suggestion? For what happened? For what we thought happened?" The other shrugged. "What else?" he asked more cheerfully. "Do you have any other explanation, Franz? Something that would account for it not working on me?" Franz hesitated. I hung on his answer, wild to know if he'd known it was coming, as he'd seemed to, and now he'd known, and whether he'd had any comparable previous experiences. The hypnotism notion, though clever, was pure nonsense. Finally, Franz shook his head and said firmly, "No." Mr. M shrugged and started the Volks. None of us wanted to talk. The experience was still with us, pinning us down inside, and then the testimony of the cards was so complete in its way, the parallelisms so exact, the conviction of shared experience so sure, that there was no great immediate urge to compare notes. Vicky did say to me, in the offhand way of a person checking a point of which he's almost certain, "Black lighthouse. That means the light was black, rays of darkness." "Of course," I told her, and then asked in the same way, "Your vines, Vicky, your threads, Franz, did they suggest those fine wire figures of curved planes in space you see in mathematical museums? Something linking a center to infinity?" They both nodded. I said, "Like my web." And that was all the talk for a bit. I took out a cigarette, remembered, and shoved it back in my top pocket. Vicky said, "Our descriptions, vaguely like descriptions of tarot cards, none of the actual tarots, though." Her remarks trailed off unanswered. Mr. M stopped at the top of a narrow drive that led down sharply to a house of which the only visible part was the flat roof, topped with pale, jagged gravel. He jumped out. "Thanks for the lift, Franz," he said. "Remember to call on me. The phone's working again, if you people should need a lift or anything." He looked quickly toward the two of us in the back seat and grinned nervously. "Goodbye, Miss Quinn. Mr. Seabury, don't—" He broke off and said simply, "So long," and walked rapidly down the drive. Of course, we guessed what he'd been going to say. "Don't see any more black tigers with 8 legs and ladies' faces," or something like that. Franz slid across into the driver's seat. As soon as the Volks got moving, I knew one reason the steady, competent Mr. M might have wanted to drive the mountainous stretch. Franz didn't exactly try to make the old Volks behave like a sports car, but his handling of it was in that direction, skittish, a bit dashing. He mused loudly. One thing keeps nagging me. Why didn't Ed Mortensen see it? If see is the right word. So at last I was sure of Mr. M.'s name, Mortensen. It seemed a triumph. Vicky said, "I can think of one possible reason, Mr. Kinsman. He isn't going where we're going." "Hey, Queen, welcome in." "You are eating a brownie. I hope it's a good brownie." I seriously want cake right now. So I have to ask you guys, now that I'm in a booth, do I sound different? Do I sound clearer? Do I sound more full? Or does it sound the same and I'm just imagining things? Tell me what you think. I'd like to know. Smoother. Clearer and full. Well, hey, Crazy Mama, I didn't see you sneak in here. Must have snuck in while I was reading. Clearer and full. I like clearer and full. Clear is good. Clear is good. You missed the stuff in the background. Yeah. Good, clear. Oh, awesome. Well, I'm glad you guys are happy with it, because I am too. Alrighty then. Oh, no worries. You got nothing to apologize for, Mama. Trust me. Nothing at all. I'm glad you're here, and that's all that matters. Well, thank you. Yeah, it's probably just because you're so used to hearing. There's probably less reverberation. We're now almost 45 minutes into the stream, and fingers crossed, the TikTok gods seem to be pleased. So, quieter a bit. Quieter in a good way, or quieter like I need to yank the gain up on my microphone a little bit? I'm okay with either one if that's what it needs. Volume, okay. Let's see how that sounds. Okay. Yes, we love the TikTok shop. We love the TikTok shop so much. So much. I don't even want to tell you how much I love the TikTok shop. I might get in trouble. People might think it's weird. All right, enough of the shenanigans. Let's get back to the story. Chapter 3. Imagine one of the world-awful bird-catching spiders of South America translated into human form and endowed with intelligence less than human, and you will have some faint conception of the terror inspired by this appalling effigy. M.R. James. Canon Alberich's scrapbook. The story that we read on Wednesday. The first story, anyway. Rim House was about 2 miles beyond Mr. Mortenson's place, and likewise on the down cliff, side of the road. It was reached by a decidedly one-lane drive. On the outside of the drive, edged by white-painted stones, was a near vertical drop of over 100 feet. I will get as weird about the TikTok shop as I want to. Thank you very much. We love the TikTok shop. Say it with me now. We love the TikTok shop. Because TikTok hasn't been loving me lately. Anyway. On the inside was a 45-degree brush-dotted rocky slope between the drive and the road, which was climbing sharply along this stretch. After about 100 yards, the drive widened to become the short, narrow, jutting plateau or terrace on which stood Rim House, occupying about half of the available space. Franz, who had taken the first part of the drive, with confident briskness, slowed the Volks to a crawl as soon as the house came into view, so we could scan the outside layout while still somewhat above it. The house was built to the very edge of the drop, which here plunged down further and even more sharply than it had along the drive. On the uphill side of the house, coming down within 2 feet of it, was a dizzily expansive slope of raw earth with hardly a thing growing in it. Smoothly geometrical as a little section of the side of a vast brown cone. Along the very top of it, a row of short white posts, so distant I couldn't see the cable joining them, marked the road we had left. The slope looked 45 degrees to me. These things always look impossibly steep, but Franz said it was only 30, a completely stabilized landslide. It had been burned over a year ago in a brush fire that had almost got the house, and still more recently there had been some minor slides started by repairs to the road above, accounting for the slope's unvegetated appearance. The house was long, 1 story, its walls finished in gray asbestos shingles. The nearly flat roof, also finished in gray asbestos, sloped gently from the cliffside in. Midway, the length of the house was a bend, allowing the house to conform to the curving top of the cliff and dividing it into 2 equal sections, or angles, to call them that. An unroofed porch, lightly railed, Franz called it the deck, ran along the near angle of the house, fronting north and thrusting several feet out over the drop, which at this point was 300 feet. On the side of the house toward the drive was a flagstone yard big enough to turn a car in, and with a lightly roofed carport up against the house on the side away from the drop. As we drove down onto the yard, there was a slight clank as we crossed a heavy metal plate bridging a small, neat ditch that ran along the foot of the raw earth slope, carrying off the water that would come down it, and also the water that would drain from the roof during California's infrequent but sometimes severe winter rains. Franz backed the car around before we got out. It required 4 movements. Swing to the corner of the house where the deck started, back with a sharp turn until the rear wheels were almost in the ditch, forward with a reverse turn until the front wheels were at the cliff edge by the metal bridgelet, then back into the carport until the rear of the car was almost up against a door that Franz told us led to the kitchen. "Hey, Tessa. Good to see you." "I haven't been restricted yet. They're being nice to me tonight." Of course, now I say that and they're going to smack me, but we'll see. Yes, happy human voices only. The 3 of us got out, and Franz led us to the center of the flagged yard for another look around before we went inside. I noticed that some of the gray flags were actually solid rock showing through the light soil cover, indicating that the plateau was not an earth terrace cut by men, but a rocky, flat-surfaced knob thrusting out of the hillside. It gave me a feeling of security, which I especially welcomed because there were other impressions, sensations rather, that were distinctly disturbing to me. Deborah, you are the awesome. You became a superfan? Thank you. I really appreciate you. I really do. Thank you so much. You're the bomb. You are the bomb. Man, I get 2 more superfans and I really will dance. You guys will get it. I will twerk. No, I won't. No, I will not twerk. Never. Never, 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 never. All right. We couldn't handle the Papa Cakes. Okay, I'm keeping that, my response to that, inside my head where it belongs. Oh my God, you guys are going to get me in trouble. But it's the best kind of trouble. All right, let's keep reading. They were minor sensations, all of them, barely on the threshold of awareness. Ordinarily, I don't think I'd have noticed them. I don't consider myself a sensitive person, but undoubtedly the strange experience of the thing on the pinnacle had keyed me up. To begin with, there was the hint of the nasty smell of burnt linen, and with it an odd, bitter, brassy taste. I don't think I imagined these things, because I noticed Franz wrinkling his nostrils and working his tongue against his teeth. Then there was the feeling of being faintly brushed by threads, cobwebs, or the finest vines. Although we were right out in the open, and the nearest thing overhead was a cloud 1/2 mile up. And just as I felt that, the faintest feeling, mind you, I noticed Vicky lightly and questing run her hand across the top of her hair and down the back of her neck in the common gesture of feeling for a spider. All this time we were talking on and off. For one thing, Franz was telling us about buying Rimhouse on quite inexpensive terms 5 years back from the heir of a wealthy surfing and sports car enthusiast who had run himself off a turn in Decker Canyon. Finally, there were the sounds that were, I thought, breathing on the verge of audibility, in the remarkably complete silence that flowed around us when the Volk's motor was cut off. I know that everyone goes from the city to the country is troubled by sounds, but these were on the unusual side. There was an occasional whistling too high-pitched for the ear's normal range, and a soft rumbling too low for it. But along with these perhaps fancied vibrations, I 3 times thought I heard the hissing rattle of fine gravel spilling down. Each time I looked quickly toward the slope, but never could catch the faintest sign of earth on the move, although there was admittedly a lot of slope to be scanned. The 3rd time I looked up the slope, some clouds had moved aside enough so that the upper rim of the sun peered back down at me. Like a golden rifleman was drawing a bead was the grotesque figure of speech that sprang to my mind. I looked hurriedly away. I wanted no more black spots before my eyes for the present. Just then Franz led us up on the deck and into Rim House by the front door. I was afraid that all the unpleasant sensations would intensify as we got inside, especially somehow the burnt linen smell and the invisible cobwebs, so I was greatly cheered when, instead, they all vanished instantly, as though faced down by the strong sense of Franz's genial, sympathetic, wide-ranging, highly civilized personality that the living room exuded. It was a long room, narrow at first where it had to give space to the kitchen and utility room and a small bathroom at the end of the house, then broadening out to the full width of the building. There was no empty wall space. It was completely lined with shelves, half of books, half of statuary, archaeological oddments, scientific instruments, tape recorder, hi-fi set, and the like. Near the inner wall, beyond the narrow section, were a big desk, some filing cabinets, and a stand with the phone. There were no windows looking out on the deck, but just beyond the deck, where the bend in the house came, was a big view window looking out across the canyon at the craggy hills that completely cut off any sight of the Pacific. Facing the view window and close to it was a long couch backed by a long table. At the end of the living room, a narrow hall led down the middle of the second angle of the house to a door that in turn led out onto a most private grassy space that could be used for sunbathing and was just big enough for a badminton court if anyone felt nervy enough to leap about swatting at the bird on the edge of the great drop. On the side of the hall near the slope was a big bedroom, Franz's, and a large bathroom opening into the hall at the end of the house. On the other side were 2 only slightly smaller bedrooms, each with a view window that could be completely masked by heavy dark drapes. These rooms had been his boy's, he remarked casually, but I noted with relief that there were no mementos or signs whatever left of youthful occupancy. My closet, in fact, had some women's clothes hanging in the back of it. These 2 bedrooms, which he assigned to Vicky and myself, had a connecting door which could be bolted from both sides, but now stood unbolted but shut, a typical indication, albeit a minor one, of Franz's civilized tactfulness. He did not know, or at least did not presume to guess, the exact relationship between Vicky and myself, and so left us to make our own arrangements as we saw fit, without any spoken suggestion that we should do so, of course. Also, each door to the hall had a serviceable bolt. Franz clearly believed in privacy for guests, and in each room was a little bowl of silver coins. No collector's items, just current American coinage. Vicky asked about that, and Franz explained deprecatingly, smiling at his own romanticism, that he copied the old Spanish California custom of the host providing guests with convenience money in that fashion. Having been introduced to the house, we unloaded the Volks of our trifling luggage and the provisions Franz had picked up in L.A. He sighed faintly at the light film of dust that had accumulated everywhere during his month's absence, and Vicky insisted that we pitch in with him and do a bit of house cleaning. Franz agreed without too much demurring. I think all of us were eager to work off the edge of this afternoon's experience and get feeling back in the real world again before we talked about it. I know I was. Franz proved an easy man to help house clean, though thoughtful for his home but not at all fussy or finicky about it. And while wielding broom or mop, Vicky looked good in her sweater, toreador pants, and high-bound sandals. She wears the modern young female's uniform with style rather than the customary effect of dreary intellectuality mated to a solemnly biologic femaleness. When we'd done, we sat down in the kitchen with mugs of black coffee. Somehow none of us wanted a drink, and listened to Franz's stew simmer. "You'll want to know," he said without preface, "if I've had any previous eerie experiences up here. If I knew something was apt to happen when I invited you up for the weekend, whether the phenomena, pretentious term, isn't it, seemed to be connected with anything in the past or of the region or the house or my own past or with current activities here, including the scientific military installations of the missile people, and finally whether I've any overall theory to account for them, such as Ed's suggestion about hypnotism." Vicky nodded. He'd adequately stated what was in our minds. "About that last, Franz," I said abruptly, "when Mr. Mortensen made that suggestion, I thought it was completely impossible. But now I'm not quite so sure. I don't mean you deliberately hypnotize us, but aren't there kinds of self-hypnosis that can be communicated to others? At any rate, the conditions were favorable for suggestion operating. Pfft. We'd just been talking about the supernatural. There was the sun and its after-images acting as an attention capturer, then the sudden transition to shadow, and finally you pointing decisively at that pinnacle as if we all had to see something there." "I don't believe that for 1 minute, Glenn," Vicky said with conviction. "Neither do I, really," I told her. "After all, the cards indicate we had remarkably similar visions. Our descriptions were just different enough to make them fearfully convincing. And I don't see where that material could have been suggested to us during the trip out or at any earlier time when we were together. Still, the idea of some obscure sort of suggestion has crossed my mind. A bend of highway hypnosis and sun hypnosis, maybe. Franz, what were your earlier experiences? I take it there were some?" He nodded, but then looked at us both thoughtfully and said, "I don't think I should tell you about them in any detail, though. Not because I'm afraid of you being skeptical or anything like that, but simply because if I do, and then similar things happen to you, you'll be more likely to feel, and rightly, that the power of suggestion may have been at work. Still, I ought to answer your questions," he continued. "So here goes, briefly and in a general way. Yes, I had experiences while I was up here alone month before last. Some of them like this afternoon's, and some of them quite different. They didn't seem to link up with any particular folklore or occult theory or anything else, yet they frightened me so that I went down to L.A. and had my eyes checked by a very good oculist, and had a psychiatrist and a couple of psychologists, I trust, give me a thorough checkup. They pronounced me fit and unwarped, likewise my eyes. After a month, I had myself convinced that everything I'd seen or sensed had been hallucinatory, that I'd simply had a case of nerves, a fit of the horrors from too much loneliness. I invited you two along partly to avoid restarting the cycle." "You couldn't have been completely convinced, though," Vicky pointed out. "You had those cards and pencils already in your pocket." Franz grinned at the neatly scored point. Right, he said. I was still keeping in mind the off-trail chance and preparing for it. And then when I got in the hills, the set of my ideas changed. What had seemed completely inconceivable in L.A. became once more a borderline possibility. Queer. Come on, let's take a turn on the deck. It'll be cool by now. We took our mugs along. It was moderately cool, all right. Most of the canyon valley had been in the shadow for at least 2 hours, and a faint breeze flowed upward around our ankles. Once I'd got used to being on the edge of the terrific drop, I found it exhilarating. Vicky must have too, for she leaned over with deliberately showy daring to peer. The floor of the canyon was choked with dark trees and undergrowth. This thinned out going up the opposite face until just across from us there was a magnificent upthrusted and folded stratum of pale tan rock that the canyon wall cut in cross-section and showed us like a geology book. Above this fold was more undergrowth. Then a series of tan and gray rocks with dark gullies and caves between them, leading by steps to a high gray summit crag. The slope behind the house completely cut off the sun from us, of course, but its yellow rays were still striking the tops of the wall across from us, traveling up them as the sun sank. The clouds had all blown away east, where a couple were still visible, and none had replaced them. In spite of being in a much cheerier normal mood, I braced myself just a bit for the eerie little sensations as we'd come out onto the deck. But they weren't there, which somehow wasn't quite as reassuring as I ought to have been. I made myself study and admire the variegated rocky wall opposite. God, what a view to wake up to every morning, Vicky said enthusiastically. You can feel the shape of the air and the height of the sky. Yes, it's quite a prospect, Franz agreed. Then they came, the little ones, faint-footed as before, feather treading the sensory thresholds, the burnt linen odor, the bitter brassy tang, the brushing of skyey cobwebs, the vibrations, not quite sound, the hissing rattling spill of ghost gravel, the minor sensations, as I named them to myself. I knew Vicky and Franz were getting them too, simply because they said no more, and I could sense them both holding very still. And then one of the last rays of the sun must have struck a mirror surface in the summit crag, perhaps an outcropping of quartz, for it struck back at me like a golden rapier, making me blink. And then for an instant the beam was glitteringly black, and I thought I saw, though nothing as clearly as I'd seen the black all-knowing spider centipede on the pinnacle, a black shape. Black with the queer churning blackness you see only at night with your eyes closed. The shape coiled rapidly down to the crag, into the cavern gullies, and around the rocks, and finally and utterly into the undergrowth above the fold, and disappeared. Along the way, Vicky had grabbed my arm at the elbow, and Franz had whipped round to look at us, and then looked back. It was strange. I felt frightened, and at the same time eager, on the edge of marvels and mysteries about to be laid bare, and there had been something quite controlled about the behavior of all of us through it. One fantastically trivial point: none of us spilled any coffee. We studied the canyon wall above the fold for about 2 minutes. Then Franz said almost gaily, "Time for dinner. Talk afterwards." I felt deeply grateful for the instant, steadying, shielding, anti-hysterical, and yes, comforting effect of the house as we went back in. I knew it was an ally. Oh, thank you guys for all the likes and shares. Really appreciate it, and all the gifts. That's really generous. Thank you. I wonder if we can get to 50,000 likes tonight. Do you think we can do that? Challenge accepted. I don't even have to say it. I know you guys will do it anyway. Anyway. All right. No more shenanigans. Back to reading. Chapter 3. When the hard-boiled rationalist came to consult me for the first time, he was in such a state of panic that not only he himself, but I also felt the wind coming over the side of the lunatic asylum. Carl Gustav Jung, Psyche and Symbol. We accompanied Franz's stew with chunks of dark pumpernickel and pale brick cheese, and followed it with fruit and coffee, then took more coffee to the long couch facing the big view window in the living room. There was a spectral yellow glow in the sky, but it faded while we were settling ourselves. Soon the first star to the north glittered faintly. Dubhe, perhaps. Why is black a frightening color? Vicky put before us. Night, Franz said, though you'll get an argument as to whether it's a color or absence of color or simply basic sensory field. But is it intrinsically frightening? Vicky nodded with pursed lips. I said, somehow the phrase, the black spaces between the stars, has always been an ultimate to me in terror. I can look at the stars without thinking of it, but the phrase gets me. Vicky said, my ultimate horror is the idea of inky black cracks appearing in things, first in the sidewalk and the sides of houses, then in the furniture and floors and cars and things, finally in the pages of books and people's faces and the blue sky. The cracks are inky black. Nothing ever shows. As if the universe were a gigantic jigsaw puzzle, I suggested. A little like that. Or a Byzantine mosaic, glittering gold and glittering black. Franz said, your picture, Vicky, suggests that sense of breaking up we feel in the modern world. Families, nations, classes, other loyalty groups falling apart. Things changing before you get to know them. Death on the installment plan, or decay by jumps, instantaneous birth, something out of nothing, reality replacing science fiction so fast you can't tell which is which. Constant sense of déjà vu. I was here before, but when? How? Even the possibility that there's no real continuity between events, just inexplicable gaps. And of course, every gap, every crack, means a new perching place for horror. It also suggests the fragmentation of knowledge, as somebody called it, I said. A world too big and complex to grasp in more than patches, too much for one man. Takes the teams of experts and teams of teams. Each expert has his field, his patch, his piece of the jigsaw puzzle, but between any two pieces is no man's land. Right, Glenn, Franz said sharply, and today I think the three of us have plunged into one of the biggest of those no man's lands. He hesitated, then, and said with an odd diffidence, almost embarrassment, you know, we're going to have to start talking sometime about what we saw. We can't let ourselves be gagged by this fear that anything we say will alter the picture of what the others saw and warp their testimony. Well, about the blackness of this thing or figure or manifestation I saw, I called it Black Empress, but Sphinx might have been a better word. There was the suggestion of a long, tigerish or serpentine body in the midst of the black, fringy sunburst. But about this blackness, now that blackness was more than anything else like the glimmering dark the eyes see in the absence of light. Right, I said. Oh, yes, Vicky chimed. There was a sense, Franz went on, that the thing was in my eyes, in my head, but also out there on the horizon, on the pinnacle, I mean. That it was somehow both subjective in my consciousness and objective in the material world, or, he hesitated and lowered his voice, or existing in some sort of space more fundamental, more primal, and less organized than either of these. Why shouldn't there be other kinds of space than those we know? He went on a shade defensively. Other chambers in the great universal cave. Men have tried to imagine 4, 5, and more spatial dimensions. What's the space inside the atom or the nucleus feel like? Or the space between the galaxies or beyond any galaxy? Oh, I know the questions I'm asking would be nonsense to most scientists. They're questions that don't make sense operationally or referentially, they'd say. But those same men can't give us the ghost of an answer to even the question of where and how the space of consciousness exists. How a jelly of nerve cells can support the huge flaming worlds of inner reality. They fob us off with the excuse, legitimate in its way, that science is about things that can be measured and pointed at, and who can measure or point at his thoughts. But consciousness is. It's the basis we all exist in and start from. It's the basis science starts from, whether or not science can get at it. So it's allowable for me to wonder whether there may not be a primal space that's a bridge between consciousness and matter, and whether the thing we saw may not exist in such a space. Maybe there are experts for this sort of thing and we're missing them, Vicky said seriously. Not scientists, but mystics and occultists, some of them at any rate, the genuine few among the crowd of fakers. You've got some of their books in your library. I recognize the titles. Franz shrugged. I've never found anything in occult literature that seemed to have a bearing. You know, the occult, very much like stories of supernatural horror, is a sort of game. Most religion, too. Believe in the game and accept its rules or the premises of the story, and you can have the thrills or whatever it is you're after. Accept the spirit world, and you can see ghosts and talk to their dear departed. Accept heaven, and you can have the hope of eternal life and the reassurance of an all-powerful God working on your side. Accept hell, and you can have devils and demons, if that's what you want. Except, if only for story purposes, witchcraft, druidism, shamanism, magic, or some modern variant that you can have werewolves, vampires, elementals, or believe in the influence and power of a grave, an ancient house or monument, a dead religion, an old stone with an inscription on it, and you can have things of the same general sort. But I'm thinking of the kind of horror and wonder, too, perhaps, that lies beyond any game, that's bigger than any game, that's fettered by no rules, conforms to no man-made theology, bows to no charms or protective rituals, that strides the world unseen and strikes without warning where it will. Much the same as, though it's of a different order of existence than all of these, lightning, or the plague, or the enemy atom bomb, the sort of horror that the whole fabric of civilization was designed to protect us from and make us forget. The horror about which man's learning tells us nothing. I stood up and moved close to the window. There seemed to be quite a few stars now. I tried to make out the big fold of rock in the hillside opposite, but the reflections on the glass got in the way. "Maybe so," Vicky said, "but there are a couple of those books I'd like to look at again. I think they're back of your desk." "What titles?" Franz asked. "I'll help you find them." Meanwhile, I'll take a turn on the deck," I said as casually as I could, moving toward the other end of the room. They didn't call after me, but I had the feeling they watched me the whole way. As soon as I'd pushed through the door, which took a definite effort of will, and shoved to it without quite shutting it behind me, which took another, I became aware of two things. That it was much darker than I'd anticipated. The big view window angled away from the deck, and there was no other obvious light source except the stars. Two, that I found the darkness reassuring. The reason for the latter seemed clear enough. The horror I'd glimpsed was associated with the sun, with blinding sunlight. Now I was safe from that. Though if someone unseen should have struck a match in front of my face just then, the effect on me would have been extreme. I moved forward by short steps, feeling in front of me with my hands at the level of the rail. I knew why I'd come out here, I thought. I wanted to test my courage against the thing, whatever it was, illusory or real or something else, inside or outside our minds, or somehow, as Franz had suggested, able to move in both regions. But beyond that, I realized now that there was the beginning of a fascination. My hands touched the rail. I studied the black wall opposite, deliberately looking a little away and then back, as one does to make a faint star or dim object come clear in the dark. After a bit, I could make out the big pale fold in some of the rocks above it. But a couple of minutes watching convinced me that it was possible endlessly to see dark shapes crossing it. I looked up at the heavens. There was no Milky Way yet, but there would be soon. The stars were flashing on so brightly and thickly at this smog-free distance from L.A. I saw the pole star straight above the dark star-silhouetted summit crag of the hillside across from me, and the Great Bear and Cassiopeia swinging from it. I felt the bigness of the atmosphere. I got a hint of the stupendous distance between me and the stars, and then, as if my vision could go out in all directions at will, piercing solidity as readily as the dark, I got a lasting, growing, wholly absorbing sense of the universe around me. Lying behind me, a gentle, swelling, perfectly rounded section of the earth about 100 miles high masked off the sun. Africa lay under my right foot, through the earth's core. India lay under my left, and it was strange to think of the compressed incandescent stuff that lay between us under the earth's cool mantle, blindingly glowing plastic metal or ore in a space where there were no eyes to see, and no millionth of a free inch in which all that dazzling locked-up light could travel. I sensed the tortured ice of the frigid poles, the squeezed water in the deep seas, the fingers of mounting lava, the raw earth crawling and quivering with an infinitude of questing rootlets and burrowing worms. Then, for moments, I felt I looked out glimmeringly through 2 billion pairs of human eyes, my consciousness running like fuse fire from mind to mind. For moments more, I dimly shared the feelings, the blind pressures and pulls of 1 billion trillion motes of microscopic life in the air, in the earth, in the bloodstream of man. Then my consciousness seemed to move swiftly outward from Earth in all directions like an expanding globe of sentient gas. I passed the dusty, dry moat that was Mars. I glimpsed milkily banded Saturn with its giant thin wheels of jumbled, jagged rock. I passed frigid Pluto with its bitter nitrogen snows. I thought of how people are like planets, lonely little forts of mind with immense black distances barring them off from each other. Then, the speed of expansion of my consciousness became infinite, and my mind was spread thin in the stars of the Milky Way and in other gauzy star islands beyond it, above, below, to all sides, among the nadir stars as well as those of the zenith, and on the trillion planets of those stars. I sensed the infinite variety of self-conscious life, naked, clothed, furred, armor-shelled, and with cells floating free, clawed, handed, tentacled, pinctured, ciliated, fingered by winds or magnetism, loving, hating, striving, despairing, imagining. For a while it seemed to me that all these things were joined in a dance that was fiercely joyous, poignantly sensuous, tenderly responsive. Then the mood darkened, and the beings fell apart in a trillion lonely motes locked off forever from each other, sensing only bleak meaninglessness in the cosmos around them. Their eyes fixed forward only on universal death. Simultaneously, each dimensionless star seemed to become for me the vast sun it was, beating incandescently on the platform where my body stood, and on the house behind it, and the beings in it, and on my body too, aging them with the glare of a billion desert noons, crumbling them to all dust in one coruscatingly blinding instant. Hands gently grasped my shoulders, and at the same time Franz's voice said, "Steady, Glenn." I held still, though for a moment every nerve cell in me seemed on the verge of triggering. Then I let out an uneven breath, edged with laughter, and turned and said in a voice that sounded to me quite dull, almost drugged, "I got lost in my imagination. For a minute there, I seemed to be seeing everything. Where's Vicky?" "Inside, leafing through the symbolism of the tarot and a couple of other books on the arcana of the fortune-telling cards, and grumbling that they don't have indexes. But what's this seeing everything, Glenn?" Haltingly, I tried to tell him about my vision, not conveying 1/100th of it, I felt. By the time I finished, I could see the blur of his face against the black wall of the house barely well enough to tell that he nodded. "The universe fondling and devouring her children," his brooding comment came out of the dark. "I imagine you've run across in your reading, Glenn, the superficially sterile theory that the whole universe is in some sense alive or at least aware. There are a lot of terms for it in the jargon of metaphysics: cosmotheism, theopantism, panpsychicism, pan-pneumaticism, but simply pantheism is the commonest. The idea that the universe is God, though for me, God isn't the right term. It's been used to mean too many things. If you insist on a religious approach, perhaps what comes closest is the Greek idea of the great god Pan, the mysterious nature deity, half animal, that frightened man and woman in panic in lonely places. Incidentally, pan-pneumaticism is the most interesting to me of the obscure concept. Old Karl von Hartmann's notion that unconscious mind is the basic reality. It comes close to what we were saying about the possibility of a more fundamental space linking the inner and outer world and perhaps providing a bridge from anywhere to anywhere. As he paused, I heard a faint spill of gravel, then a second, though I got none of the other minor sensations. But whatever we call it, Franz went on, there's something there, I feel. Something less than God, but more than the collective mind of man. A force, a power, an influence, a mood of things, as something more than subatomic particles, that is aware and that has grown with the universe and that helps to shape it. He had moved forward now so that I saw his head silhouetted against the thick stars, and for a moment there was the grotesque illusion that it was the stars rather than his mouth that was speaking. I think there are such influences, Glenn. Atomic particles alone can't sustain the flaming inner worlds of consciousness. There must be a pull from the future as well as a push from the past to keep us moving through time. There must be a ceiling of mind over life as well as a floor of matter beneath it. Again, as his voice faded out, I heard the feathery hisses of gravel running. 2 close together, then 2 more. I thought uneasily of the slope behind the house. And if there are those influences, Franz continued, I believe that man has grown enough in awareness today to be able to contact them without ritual or formula of belief if they should chance to move or look this way. I think of them as sleepy tigers, Glenn, that mostly purr and dream and look at us through slitted eyes, but occasionally, perhaps when a man gets a hint of them, open their eyes to the full and stalk in his direction, when a man becomes ripe for them, when he's pondered the possibility of them, then, when he's closed his ears to the protective, mechanically augmented chatter of humanity, they make themselves known to him. The spills of gravel, still faint as illusions, were coming now in a rapid rhythm, like it occurred to me that at that instant, padding footsteps. Each footstep dislodging a little earth, I sensed a faint, brief glow overhead. For they're the same thing, Glenn, as the horror and wonder I talked about inside, the horror and wonder that lies beyond any game that strides the world unseen and strikes without warning where it will. At that instant, the silence was ripped by a shrill scream of terror from the flagged yard between the house and the drive. For an instant, my muscles were chilled and constricted, and there was a gagging pressure in my chest. Then I lunged toward the end of the deck. Franz darted into the house. I plunged off the end of the deck, almost fell, twisted to my feet, and stopped, suddenly at a loss for my next move. Here I couldn't see a thing in the blackness. In stumbling, I'd lost my sense of direction. For the moment, I didn't know which way were the slope, the house, and the cliff edge. I thought I heard Vicky. I thought it had to be Vicky, gasping and sobbing strainingly, but the direction of that wouldn't become clear, except it seemed more ahead of me than behind me. Then I saw, stretching up before me, a half-dozen or so thin, close-placed stalks of what I can only describe as a more gleaming blackness. It differed from the background as dead black velvet does from dead black felt. They were barely distinguishable, yet very real. I followed them up with my eyes as they mounted against the star fields, almost invisible, like black wires, to where they ended high up in a bulb of darkness, defined only by the patch of stars it obscured, as tiny as the moon. The black bulb swayed, and there was a corresponding rapid jogging in the crowded black stalks, as though if they were free to move at the base, I ought to call them legs. A door opened 20 feet from me, and a beam of white light struck across the yard, showing a streak of flagstones on the beginning of the drive. Franz had come out the kitchen door with a powerful flashlight. My surroundings jumped sideways into place. The beam swept back along the slope, showing nothing. Then forward toward the cliff edge. When it got to the spot where I'd seen the ribbony black legs, it stopped. There were no stalks, legs, or bands of any sort to be seen, but Vicky was swaying and struggling there, her dark hair streaming across her face and half obscuring her agonized expression, her elbows tight to her sides, her hands near her shoulders and clawed outward, exactly as though she were gripping and struggling against the vertical bars of a tight cage. The next instant, the tension went out of her, as though whatever she'd been struggling against had vanished. She swayed and began to move in blind, tottering steps toward the cliff edge. That snapped my freeze, and I ran toward her, grabbed her wrist as she stepped on the verge, and half dragged, half whirled her away from it. She didn't resist. Her movement toward the cliff had been accidental, not idle. Franz kept the flashlight on us. She looked at me, one side of her blanched face twitching, and said, "Glenn." Franz yelled at us from the kitchen door, "Come on in!" "4. But the third sister, who is also the youngest, hush, whisper whilst we talk of her. Her kingdom is not large, or else no flesh should live, but within that kingdom all power is hers. Her head, turreted like that of Sibylle, rises almost beyond the reach of sight. She droops not, and her eyes, rising so high, might be hidden by distance, but being what they are, they cannot be hidden. This youngest sister moves with incalculable motions, bounding with tiger's leaps. She carries no key. For though coming rarely amongst men, she storms all doors at which she is permitted to enter at all, and her name is Mater Tenenbaum, Our Lady of Darkness. Thomas de Quincey. Suspiria de Profundis. As soon as we got Vicky inside, she recovered very rapidly from her shock, and at once insisted on telling us her story. Her manner was startlingly assured, interested, almost gay, as if some protective door in her mind were already closed against the absolute reality of what had happened. At one point she even said, "It all still could have been a series of little sounds and sights, combined with suggestion working powerfully. Like the night I saw a burglar standing against the wall beyond the foot of my bed, saw him so clearly in the dark that I could have described him down to the cut of his mustache and the droop of his left eyelid, until the dawn coming on turned him into my roommate's black overcoat with a tan scarf thrown around the hanger and hook." While she'd been reading, she said, she'd become aware of the ghost spills of gravel. some of them seeming to rattle faintly against the back wall of the house, and she'd gone out at once through the kitchen to investigate. Groping her way, moving a few steps beyond the Volks toward the center of the yard, she had looked toward the slope and at once seen moving across it an incredibly tall, wispy shape that she described as a giant harvestman, tall as 10 trees. You know, harvestmen. Some people call them daddy longlegs, those utterly harmless, pitifully fragile spiders that are nothing but a tiny brown inanimate-looking ball with 8 bendy legs that are like lengths of half-stiffened brown thread. She'd seen it quite clearly in spite of the darkness, because it was black with a black shimmer. Once it had vanished completely when a car had turned the bend in the road above and its headlights had feebly swept the air high above the slope. That would have been the faint, brief overhead glow I'd sensed. But when the headlights swung away, the giant, black, glimmering harvestman had come back at once. She hadn't been frightened, wonderstruck and terribly curious, rather, until the thing had come treading rapidly toward her, its shimmering black legs drawing closer and closer together until, before she realized it, they were a tight cage around her. Then, as she discovered they weren't quite as thin and insubstantial as she'd imagined, and as she felt their feathery, almost bristly touch against her back and face and sides, she'd suddenly snapped and given that one terrific scream and started to struggle hysterically. "Spiders drive me wild," she finished lightly. And then there was the feeling I'd be sucked up the cage and to the black brain in the stars. I thought of it as a black brain then, no reason why. Franz didn't say anything for a bit. Then he began in a rather heavy, halting way. "You know, I don't think I showed much foresight or consideration when I invited you two up here. Quite the opposite. In fact, even if I didn't then believe it, anyway, I don't feel right about it. Look here, you could take the Volks right now, or I could drive, and..." "I think I know what you're getting at, Mr. Kinsman, and why," Vicky said with a little laugh, standing up. "But I, for one, have had quite enough excitement for one night. I have no desire to top it off with watching for ghosts in the headlights for the next 2 hours." She yawned. "I want to hit that luxurious hay you've provided for me right this minute. Night-night, Franz. Glenn." With no more words, she walked down the hall and went into her bedroom, the far one, and closed the door. Franz said in a low voice, "I think you know I meant that very seriously, Glenn. It still might be the best thing." I said, "Vicky's got some kind of inner protection built up now. To get her to leave Rimhouse, we'd have to break it down. That would be rough." Franz said, "Better rough, maybe, than what else might happen here tonight." I said, "So far, Rimhouse has been a protection for us. It's shut things out." He said, "It didn't shut out the footsteps Vicky heard." I said, remembering my vision of the cosmos, "But, Franz, if we're up against the sort of influence we think we are, then it seems to me pretty ridiculous to imagine a few miles of distance or a few bright lights making any more difference to its power than the walls of a house." He shrugged. "We don't know," he said. "Did you see it, Glenn?" "Holding the light, I didn't see anything." "Just like Vicky described it," I assured him, and went on to tell my own little tale. "If that was all suggestion," I said, "it was a pretty fancy variety. I squeezed my eyes and yawned. I was suddenly feeling very dull. Reaction, I suppose. I finished. Well, it was happening, and later while we were listening to Vicky, there certainly were times when all I wanted to be back in the old familiar world with the old familiar hydrogen bomb hanging over my head and all the rest of that stuff. But at the same time, weren't you fascinated? Franz demanded. Didn't it make you crazy to know more? The thought that you were seeing something utterly strange and that there was a chance really to understand the universe, or at least meet its unknown lords. I don't know, I told him wearily. I suppose so, in a way. What did the thing really seem like, Glenn? Franz asked. What kind of being, if that's the right word? I'm not sure it is, I said. I found it difficult to summon the energy to answer his questions. Not an animal, not even an intelligence as we understand it. More like the things we saw on the pinnacle and the crag. I tried to marshal my fatigue-drugged thoughts. Halfway between reality and a symbol, I said, if that means anything. But weren't you fascinated? Franz repeated. I don't know, I said, pushing my feet with an effort. Look, Franz, I'm too beat to be able to do any more thinking now. It's just too hard to think about these things. Good night. Good night, Glenn, he said as I walked to my bedroom. Nothing more. Midway getting undressed, it occurred to me that my dazed sleepiness might be my mind's defense against having to cope with the unknown, but even that thought wasn't enough to rouse me. I pulled on my pajamas and put out the light. Just then the door to Vicky's bedroom opened and she stood there wearing a light robe. I had thought of looking in on her, but had decided that if she were sleeping, it was the best thing for her, and any attempt to check on her might break her inner protection. But now I could tell from her expression, by the bit of light from her room, that they were shattered. At the same moment, my own inner protection, the false sleepiness, was gone. Vicky closed the door behind her, and we moved together and put our arms around each other and stood there. After a while, we lay down side by side on the bed under the view window that showed the stars. Vicky and I are lovers, but there wasn't an atom of passion in our embraces now. We were simply two, not so much frightened as completely overawed people, seeking comfort and reassurance in each other's presence. Not that we could hope to get any security, any protection from each other. The thing looming above us was far too powerful for that. But only a sense of not being alone, of sharing whatever might happen. There wasn't the faintest impulse to seek temporary escape in lovemaking, as we might have done to shut out a more physical threat. The thing was too weird for that. For once, Vicky's body was beautiful to me in a completely cold, abstract way that had no more to do with desire than the colors in an insect's wing case, or the curve of a tree, or the glitter of a snowfield. Yet within this strange form, I knew was a friend. We didn't speak a word to each other. There were no easy words for most of our thoughts, sometimes no words at all. Besides, we shrank from making the slightest sound, as two mice would while a cat sniffs past the clump of grass in which they are hiding. For the sense of a presence looming around or over Rimhouse was overpoweringly strong. Dipping into Rimhouse now, too, for all the minor sensations came drifting down on us like near impalpable black snowflakes, the dark, burnt taste and smell, the fluttering cobwebs, the bat sounds and the wave sounds, and once again the feathery spills of gravel. And above and beyond them the sense of a black uprearing presence, linked to the whole cosmos by the finest black filaments that in no way impeded it. I didn't think of Franz. I hardly thought of the things that had happened today, though now and then I would worry at the edge of a memory. We simply lay there and held still and looked at the stars, minute after minute, hour after hour. At times we must have slept. I know I did, though blacked out would be a better expression for it. For there was no rest, and waking was a nightmarish business of slowly becoming aware and dark aches and chills. For a long while I noticed that I could see the clock in the far corner of the room because its dial was luminescent, I thought. The hands pointed to 3 o'clock. I gently turned Vicky's face toward it, and she nodded that she could see it too. The stars were what was keeping us sane, I told myself, in a world that might dissolve to dust at the faintest breath from the nearer presence. It was just after I noticed the clock that the stars began to change color, all of them. First, they had a violet tinge, which shifted to blue, then green. In an unimportant corner of my mind, I wondered what fine mist or dust drifting through the air could work that change. The stars turned to dim yellow, to orange, to dark furnace red, and then, like the last sparks crawling on a sooty chimney wall above a dead fire, winked out. I thought crazily of the stars all springing away from Earth, moving with such impossible swiftness that their light had shifted beneath the red into invisible ranges. We should have been in utter darkness then. But instead we began to see each other and the other things around us, outlined by the faintest white glimmer. I thought it was the first hint of morning, and I suppose Vicky did too. We looked together at the clock. It was barely 4:30. We watched the minute hand edge. Then we looked back at the window. It wasn't ghostly pale as it would have been with dawn, but, and I could tell that Vicky saw this too by the way she gripped my hand, it was a pitch black square, framed by the white glimmer. I could think of no natural explanation for the glimmer. It was a little like a white, paler version of the luminescence of the clock dial. But even more, it was like the pictures one imagines in one's eyes in absolute darkness, when one wills the churning white sparks of the retinal field to coalesce into recognizable ghostly forms. It was as if that retinal dark had spilled out of our eyes into the room around us, and we were seeing each other and our surroundings not by light, but by the power of imagination, which each second increased the sense of miracle that the shimmering scene did not dissolve into churning chaos. We watched the hand of the clock edge toward 5. The thought that it must be getting light outside and that something barred us from seeing that light finally stirred me to move and speak, though the sense of an inhuman, inanimate presence was as strong as ever. "We've got to try and get out of here," I whispered. Moving across the bedroom pike, a shimmering ghost, Vicky opened the connecting door. The light had been on in her room, I remembered. There wasn't the faintest glimmer visible through the door. Her bedroom was dead black. I'd fix that, I thought. I switched on the lamp by the bed. My room became solid black. I couldn't see even the face of the clock. Light is darkness now, I thought. White is black. I switched off the light and the glimmer came back. I went to Vicky where she was standing by the door and whispered to her to switch off the light in her room. Then I got dressed, mostly feeling around for my clothes, not trusting the ghostly light that was so much like a scene inside my head, trembling on the verge of dissolution. Vicky came back. She was even carrying her little overnight bag, and I inwardly approved the poise that action indicated, but I made no effort to take any of my own things. "My room is very cold," Vicky said. We stepped into the hall. I heard a familiar sound, the whir of a telephone dial. I saw a tall, silver figure standing in the living room. It was a moment before I realized it was Franz. Seen by the glimmer, I heard him say, "Hello? Operator? Operator?" We walked to him. He looked at us, holding the receiver to his ear. Then he put it down again and said, "Glenn, Vicky, I've been trying to phone Ed Mortensen to see if the stars changed there or anything else, but it doesn't work for me. Try your luck at getting the operator, Glenn." He dialed once, then handed me the receiver. I heard no ringing, no buzz, but a sound like wind wailing softly. "Hello, operator?" I said. There was no response or change, just that wind sound. "Wait," Franz said softly. It must have been at least 5 seconds when my own voice came back to me out of the phone, very faintly, half drowned in the lonely wind like an echo from the end of the universe. "Hello, operator?" My hand shook as I put down the phone. "The radio?" I asked. "The wind sound?" he told me, "all over the dial?" "Just the same, we've got to try to get out." "I suppose we should," he said with a faint, ambiguous sigh. "I'm ready. Come on." As I stepped onto the deck after Franz and Vicky, I felt the intensified sense of a presence. The minor sensations were with us again, but far stronger now. The burnt taste made me gag almost. I wanted to claw at the cobwebs. The impalpable wind moaned and whistled loudly. The ghost gravel hissed and splashed like rapids of the river, all in near absolute darkness. I wanted to run, but Franz stepped forward to the barely glimmering rail. I held on to myself. The faintest glimmer showed a few lines of the rock wall opposite, but from the sky above it was beating a dead, inkier blackness, blacker than black, I thought, that was eating up the glimmering everywhere, dimming it moment by moment, and with inkier blackness came a chill that struck into me like ice needles. "Look," Franz said, "it's the sunrise." "Franz, we've got to get moving," I said. "In a moment," he answered softly, reaching back his hand. "You go ahead. Start the car. Pull out to the center of the yard. I'll join you there." Vicky took the keys from him. She's driven a Volks. There was still enough glimmer to see by, though I trusted it less than ever. Vicky started the car, then forgot and switched on the headlights. They obscured the yard and drove with a fan of blackness. She switched them off and pulled to the center of the yard. I looked back. Although the air was black with icy sunlight, I could still see Franz clearly by the ghost light. He was standing where we'd left him, only leaning forward now as though eagerly peering. "Franz!" I called loudly against the weirdly wailing wind and the mounting gravel roar. "Franz!" There reared out of the canyon, facing Franz, towering above him, bending toward him a little, a filament-trailing form of shivering black velvet. Not the ghost light, but shimmering darkness itself that looked like a gigantic hooded cobra, or a hooded Madonna, or a vast centipede, or a giant cloaked figure of the cat-headed goddess Bast, or all or none of these. I saw the sliver of Franz's body begin to crumble and churn. In the same moment, the dark form dipped down and enfolded him just like the silk-gloved fingers of a colossal black hand, or the petals of a vast black flower closing. Feeling like someone who throws the first shovel of earth on the coffin of a friend, I croaked to Vicky to get going. There was hardly any glimmer left, not enough to see the drive, I thought, as the Volk started up it. Vicky drove fast. The sound of the spilling gravel grew louder and louder, drowning out the intangible wind, drowning out our motor. It rose to a thunder under the moving wheels, transmitting through them. I could feel the solid earth shaking. A bright pit opened ahead of us on the canyon side. For a moment, it was as if we were driving through veils of thick smoke. Then suddenly, Vicky was braking. We were turning into the road, and early daylight was almost blinding us. But Vicky didn't stop. We headed up the Little Sycamore Canyon Road. Around us were the turreted hills. The sun hadn't yet climbed above them, but the sky was bright. We looked down the road. No dust clouds obscured it anywhere, though there was dust rising now from the bottom of the canyon valley. The slope swept down straight from us to the cliff edge, without a break, without a hummock, without one object thrusting up through. Everything had been carried away by the slide. That was the end of Rimhouse and Franz Kinsman. I'll just let you guys sit with that one for a minute. Oh, Wild, thank you. That's wonderful, thank you. Yeah, that's a good one. It was, when I was looking at this one the other day when I was picking out stories for this week, I sat down, I looked at the premise, I did some research on it, and yeah, that's when I sat down and read it, and I knew I had to share it with you guys. So that was a good one. That's one of those ones that, and I got to be honest with you, I'm definitely going to be reading more Fritz Leiber. Everything that I've read of his is fantastic. He's so good. Sunshine, you didn't fall asleep. Yes. Congratulations. You have won the prize. I don't know what the prize is, but you have won it. Yeah, so that was a good, like, mind bender of a story. And I love the ending. Absolutely love the ending. But yeah, we'll definitely be doing more Fritz Leiber stuff. So yeah, he does, and I will say that I know that King is a fan of Fritz Leiber. It's kind of funny because, I mean, you look at these guys, and like I said before, you know, there is like, you look at all of the quotes at the beginning of the chapters. You had Rudyard Kipling, Carl Jung, you know, you had M.R. James. M.R. James is like one of those. He is like the master of the Victorian ghost story. We've read a couple of his stuff on here before. There was the Mezzotint and Whistle and I'll Come to Thee, My Lad. And then the one from Wednesday night. And when I was reading through this one and I saw that it had that tie back to the one from the story from Wednesday night, I was like, oh, this is just going to make it even the better. But yeah, you kind of can feel the lineage and how they tie together, and how Lovecraft greatly admired M.R. James, and obviously Leiber did as well, and Leiber admired Lovecraft, and Robert Bloch, who we read the other night, was mentored by Lovecraft. And then of course you have guys like Richard Matheson, who come into these, who are part of this whole horror lineage, and without Lovecraft you don't have Matheson, without Matheson you don't have King. So there is that whole tie through, which is really wild when you start to see it. And I think that's one of the things, sorry about that. I think it's one of the things that I love about doing this, is being able to kind of sort of weave our way through the history of weird fiction, whether it be horror, science fiction, or fantasy, or any of that stuff. So it is so much fun to bring these stories to you guys, and either reintroduce them to you or introduce them to you as new. And to be honest with you, a lot of these stories I have never read before. So, we're kind of, some of them I've cold read, where you and I are both experiencing them for the first time, but I do try to read them beforehand. But there's quite a few of them that I have read over the years, and I love being able to just reshare them with you guys. So, wow, it is like, that was like right on the money. And you know what? We didn't get restricted by TikTok, because we love TikTok and we love the TikTok shop. So I may have hit on something here with this new visual format. So yeah, so let's see what we're setting up with these tubes. But yeah, so. Hey, over there on the tubes, I'm so glad you catch us too. And you know what? Even if you're late, you're right on time, as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, I think I'm going to stick with this for now and see what happens. Got to trim my beard because it's getting a little out of control there. Oh, nice. Karen, that's awesome. TikTok, bringing people together. And then being weird about it. Well, I am super happy that you all could join me tonight. I think that's where we'll leave our story tonight, with the unsettling thought that perhaps the unknown has never been as far away as we like to believe. Thank you all for spending a little time with me around the fire tonight. Join me on Sunday as we begin Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie, a story of pirates, lost boys, and a place where no one ever has to grow up. I look forward to sharing that one with you guys. It is long enough that it's probably going to be a Sunday, Monday, and then another Sunday, Monday, and we'll go from there. But I will see you guys on Sunday. If you enjoy these stories and would like to help support what I do here, please consider subscribing or becoming a super fan, or checking out the UndeadPapa Mercantile and buying some merch. The link is in the place where you know the bio in the doobly-doo. Yes. Every bit of support helps keep the campfire lit. And yeah, you can be like Deborah and become a super fan. Thank you, Deborah. If you're still in here, I appreciate you. And even if you're not in here, I still appreciate you. All right. So everybody have a good weekend. We will see you on Sunday. And until then, please be kind to each other. And be kind to yourself, because kindness matters. And so do you. Good night, everybody. And good night over there on the tubes. I appreciate you guys hanging in there. I will be doing more and more stuff coming up on YouTube very, very soon. And I hope you guys will stick around for it. So we'll see you on Sunday.